Hey there, this is a kind of a summary lesson of harmony in Aural Skills 3 at Brigham Young University. Some of you have come back from missions or have taken a year off or transferring and haven't been doing harmonic dictation for a while. So here's kind of a summary of all of the diatonic progressions we've talked about. After this, we're going to be starting to add chromatic chords like secondary dominants. So before we do that, let's talk about all the diatonic chords and the bass scale degrees and what chords they would support. I'm not necessarily going to be talking about chord progressions like you would in a theory class as much as what are the bass scale degrees and what chords would they support. And I've divided this up into major keys and minor keys, which are mostly the same, what chords they can support. There's some differences. And I've also divided up into the most likely chords. These are the ones you're going to find 95% of the time, and the less common chords down here, which could happen, but you're not likely going to see them as much. So if you have 1 in the bass, it's going to support a 1 chord. If you have a 3 in the bass, it's going to support a 1/6 chord. 5 in the bass is going to support a 5 or a 5/7 or a cadential 6/4. Which then leads to a 5 or a 5/7. Okay, so those ones are pretty stable. You see, scale degree 6 is going to be either a 6 chord or sometimes a 4/6 chord. It's more often a 6 chord. When you get to scale degree 7, there's only dominant types. You can have a. Let's do like this. How about? With a T in the bass. Alright, but you might also have, so you might have this is a regular 5/6. You might add a 7th to make it a 5/6/5. And a newer one that we've done is now, wait, there it is, sorry. T, re, fa, la, the 7 diminished 7, half diminished 7. And these all function progressing to tonic. Slightly different sounding, but they all have the same function. Okay, so we've talked about 1, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Now scale degrees 2 and 4 are a lot more variable. You can see that they can support a subdominant function chord or a dominant function chord. So a dominant function chord is going to have a T in it, T, do, a leading tone, whereas a subdominant will not. So on scale degree 2, we can have a 2 chord, or we can put a 7th on there. So that's a subdominant function. Now, this is 7 diminished 6 is a chord that is usually used when to pass between 1 and 1/6, and it's a dominant function. So you could have this one, or you could have this one. They're very similar. We have re, fa, ti or re, fa, sol, ti, both passing dominant function chords. And since they have a similar function, it's not too big of a deal if you get them mixed up. So 2 different types of chords you can get onto. A root position 2 chord or one of these passing dominants. Now scale degree 4 is a bit trickier now. The most obvious one is the 4 chord. So subdominant, but you could also have a 2/6, which is often more common than a 4 actually. So the difference between those, this one has do, and this one has re in it somewhere. Now if you combine those together, you get the 2/6/5, which is fa, la, do, re. So it's both of those. All 3 of these have the same subdominant function. They move to a dominant. The only chord that can happen on a 4 that's fairly common, that's a dominant function, is the 5/4/2. So it's basically this. The fa is the 7th of the 5 chord, and it resolves to a 1/6 chord. So we have this actually. Oops, I shouldn't double that chord. There we go, that's better. So that's a summary of the most common chords, most likely chords in major keys. Now, you can have other possibilities. I'll just point out a few of these less common chords. On one, instead of a 1, you could have a pedal 4/6/4, a pedal 2/2, and much less likely a 6/6 or a 4/4/3. The 7-6 and 7 or 5/4/3 could also less likely be a 5/6/4. So it functions similarly, just doesn't have the 7th. Also, you could add a, stop doing that. You could add a 7th to the 7 diminished 6, and it becomes a 7/2 diminished 6/5. Okay, that second chord there. The 3 chord I've listed as less common just because it's not used very much. What else? You can add a 7th to the 4, but it's not too common. The second inversion of the 7 diminished, half diminished. 3/6 is a very unlikely chord. 2/4/3 is not too uncommon. These others are not quite as common, but you can add a 7th to your 6th. Root position 7 diminished, not common. Okay, so those are less common chords. Now, if you compare the chords that are listed in major with those that are listed in minor, you see that they're largely the same. Let's just look at the most likely chords. So the minor 1, the minor 1/6 on scale degree 3, the 5 on scale degree 5. Okay, on scale degree, now you do have some additional scale degrees here because we can have the lowered 6 lay or the raised 6 la. Not too common to build a chord on it though. It is possible to build a chord on the flat 7, especially in minor keys. And notice that the 3 is now listed as a common chord. It's likely to happen, much more likely to happen in a piece in minor than a piece in major. So there's my major 3 chord. There's a minor 4. Okay, and then a major 5. These are the same. Okay, so these are the same as in a major key, except for the 7 is now fully diminished. The others are the same. Okay, going to the 5s are the same, cadentia 6/4 or 5. The 6 has a little bit, you can have the major 6th, the major 6th, the minor 4/6, and also all variants of the 7 fully diminished 7. Even this one, all inversions of the fully diminished 7th chord are fairly common. So we've added one there. Now notice that the 2 root position is not listed as common because it's a diminished triad, so it's less likely. But if you add a 7th to it, you can get a root position 2 diminished 7. The 7 diminished 6 that we had before, the 5/4/3 that we had before, but now also 7 fully diminished 6/5 is common. Okay, going into scale degree 4, we have our regular 4 chord, our 2 diminished 6, our 2 half diminished 6/5. So those are similar to in major keys. Also the 5/4/2, and adding to that a 5th possibility, the 7 fully diminished 4/3. So again, all inversions of this fully diminished 7th chord are pretty common. Okay, I'm not going to spend any time really talking about these. They're similar to the less common chords in the major key. So if your primary focus can be on the commonly occurring chords in both major and minor keys, and once in a while you run across one of these others, it'll help. And if you just remember what chords are common over particular scale degrees, it can reduce the possibilities quite a bit. As we can see, most of the choices you'll have to make are over scale degree 2 and 4. And even in places where there's multiple possibilities, they all have precisely the same function, like here. These are all functioning the same way. They're all going to resolve to that. That's major, sorry. Let's do... there. Okay. So hopefully this will alleviate some of the concerns about harmonic dictation. This sheet will be up on Learning Suite for you to study, and I encourage you to get it a piano and just sort of play these chords and listen to how they're slightly different from each other, especially things like the 4 versus the 2/6 versus the 2/6/5, to hear those little tiny things that make them unique, even though they have the same function. Okay, I think that'll do it. Good luck with your harmonic dictation.